Borzou Daraghi, correspondent for The Independent, joins us. Borzou, you're just back from Idlib. Before I ask you what's next, tell us what you saw.
I mean, I saw a devastated region, utterly, completely in a situation of crisis where hundreds of thousands of people, almost all of them civilians, are struggling really to just get by. And every person that you meet has a terrible story to tell about what they've been through. They can't, many of them are displaced. They can't go back to their homes in other war-ravaged parts of Syria, and they can't leave Syria because the only exit is Turkey, and Turkey is not letting people across the border. And so they're stuck basically running from village to village, town to town, trying to escape the war as it envelops their communities.
When you were there, who did you see in terms of who was controlling what? Because, as we know, on the one side, there's the Russian-backed forces of Bashar al-Assad. On the other, there's a myriad of groups.
Yeah, a myriad of groups, but I have a strong sense, and talking to some of the people there, that one group is dominant. It's called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. This is a very controversial organization. It's a federation of former rebel groups. Many of them are rather Salafist, a little bit would be considered Islamic extremists, and one of them is a former affiliate of Al Qaeda. And so, but they are trying to rebrand themselves, as and to their in credit of their own propaganda, they say they have no agenda, unlike Al Qaeda, beyond Syria. They don't have a global agenda. They are basically trying to liberate parts of Syria from Bashar al-Assad, and they don't have any ambitions of spreading their ideology elsewhere. But there are extremists among those who are running the area.
And how much sway does Turkey have over them?
I think it has a lot of sway. I think that especially with the recent Turkish intervention that your correspondent referred to, the attacks that they made on Bashar al-Assad positions, the destruction of a lot of regime-heavy equipment, aircraft, helicopters, fighter jets, has given the rebel groups an incentive to lay aside their differences and combine with Turkish-backed forces to fend off Bashar al-Assad. I think that Turkey has influence. Turkey maybe doesn't have 100% control over all of these groups, but it has influence, and it does communicate with them either directly or through intermediaries.
We're coming out, Borzou Daraghi, of a week that's seen a huge escalation in northeast Syria, the downing of 3 Syrian government jets, the killing of those 34 Turkish soldiers last week, retaliatory attacks against the Syrian army, now a ceasefire in Moscow. What was it all about?
I mean, it's about the future of Syria and who will decide that future. And Turkey wants a haven for the Syrian refugees who are not pro-government. But the Syrian government and its patrons in Moscow, in Tehran, see this haven, I think, because of the nature of the groups that are there, the legitimacy they have, their ferociousness, their ability to fight. They see these groups, including Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, as a threat, as a big threat, bigger than other threats. And so they will not, they would, maybe perhaps if there was different groups running Idlib, if there were different groups that were dominant, it would not be seen as such a threat. But because Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they're such good fighters and they have such legitimacy across the Syrian political landscape at this point, they see them as an intolerable force.
Thursday in Moscow, the talks between the two presidents of Russia and Turkey ran over more than 6 hours. What do you think was going on behind those closed doors?
I mean, I think they were hammering out some kind of agreement. I think there's a lot of differences between the Russian and the Turkish agenda. I think that both sides are kind of bolstering their position. I think one interesting thing that people pointed out on social media is that this agreement was published in Russian, Turkish, and English, but it was not, there was no official version of it in Arabic, which is the language of Syria, not just the Syrian government, but the Syrian opposition as well. I mean, and that's a pretty, it's a power move on their part to basically say we're the ones who are deciding Syria's future at this point. And with regard to either the regime or its opponents, we're not that concerned about them. They're just sort of side players as we establish the ground rules here. I'm going to say one thing that I'm not sure of 100%, but Turkish forces have really, using NATO caliber weaponry and precision guided missiles, have really hurt the Syrian regime over the past week. They have pummeled Syrian hardware, drones, aircraft, helicopters, armored vehicles, tanks, artillery pieces, and personnel. And I have a suspicion based on past experiences and past ceasefires that we've seen in Syria that the Russians are basically just trying to get time for the Syrian regime to reload and re-up its
yeah, I was going to say, because now you have this deal where you're going to have joint patrols between the Russians and the Turks along that strategic M4 highway. How long can it last?
Exactly. How long can it last? In the past, we've had ceasefires begin to crumble within hours. Sometimes they begin to crumble within weeks. Sometimes it's a few days and they begin to crumble, and there's this erosion. As long as the political will for peace is not there, you're going to have a move towards more armed conflict.